A mother writes a children's book about grief. A gentle story meant to help kids cope with losing someone they love. But prosecutors in Utah say this wasn't grief. They say it was performance. Written by the very woman who caused the death at the center of her own story. This is the case of Kouri Richins, the alleged Black Widow of Commas, Utah. Accused of poisoning her husband with fentanyl, then turning his death into content. And in the middle of it all, a jailhouse walk the dog letter prosecutors say exposes her state of mind. A letter that changed everything. March 3, 2022, just after midnight, outside Park City, Utah. First responders are called to a large home on a quiet street. They find 39-year-old Eric Richins in the couple's bedroom, cold, unresponsive. Lying in the bed where he was supposed to be safest. His wife, Kouri, meets them with a story. She says they'd been celebrating a big real estate closing. They had a drink together. Then she went to sleep in one of the children's rooms. Later, she says, she came back to bed, found Eric on the floor, and called 911. But the autopsy would tell a different story. Toxicology revealed a massive dose of fentanyl in Eric's system. Roughly 5 times the amount needed to kill. This wasn't a trace or an accidental contact. This was a lethal dose. The kind that rarely happens by mistake. The question wasn't just, how did Eric Richins die? It became who put that fentanyl in his body and why. On social media and in public, Kouri and Eric looked like the American dream. 3 young boys, a growing real estate business. Smiling photos in front of new properties and mountain views. But investigators say that behind that image, the marriage was under pressure. Court records describe arguments about money, tension over risky real estate deals, and questions about who really controlled the finances. Friends would later tell detectives that Eric had grown uneasy, that he worried about how fast the money was moving, and about deals he felt pressured into backing. The defense pushes back on that. They say like many couples, the Richins had stress. But stress does not equal motive for murder. To prosecutors, Eric wasn't just a husband, he was also a financial asset. Investigators uncovered a trail of paperwork they say reveals motive. Life insurance policies with Eric as the insured. Applications and alleged attempts to change the beneficiary. Real estate deals and loans tied to his name and his credit. Not just a policy that only pays out when Eric is dead. Not just a home he allegedly never agreed she could own alone. Court filings claim that at one point, Kouri tried to change a life insurance policy to make herself the sole beneficiary, for a total coverage approaching $2 million. When that change didn't go through the way she wanted, prosecutors say the financial pressure didn't disappear. It started to focus on Eric himself. There were also property disputes, a large, unfinished home that became a lightning rod between Kouri and Eric's family. Questions over who really owned what, and whose signature had been used. To the state, this isn't just messy bookkeeping, it's a pattern. Big dreams, big debts, and a husband worth more dead than alive. The defense counters that picture. They argued, real estate is volatile. People take out insurance. People move money around. They insist that paperwork is not poison, and that these documents prove only that Kouri was ambitious, not homicidal. Then there's the night prosecutors say was the first warning. Valentine's Day, just weeks before Eric's death. According to the state, Eric became violently ill after a meal Kouri brought him. So sick he reportedly told a friend, if anything happens to me, look at Kouri. To prosecutors, that Valentine's Day episode isn't a coincidence. It's a test run, a rehearsal for what would happen weeks later. A former acquaintance would later testify that Kouri asked for powerful drugs, allegedly using the phrase some Michael Jackson stuff, street language for potent anesthetics and pain medications. Later, that same witness says Kouri asked for something stronger, fentanyl. Prosecutors connect those dots like this: a request for powerful drugs, a sudden, unexplained illness on Valentine's Day, then, weeks later, a fentanyl overdose that ends in death. The defense argues those connections are speculative. They point out there is no lab report from Valentine's Day proving fentanyl was involved. No direct forensic link between that sandwich and poison. To them, it's a story built on hindsight, not hard science. Back to March 3rd, the night Eric dies. Kouri's version is simple. They celebrate a business deal. She fixes Eric a drink. He goes to bed. She says she goes to settle one of their children. Falls asleep in the child's room and wakes up to find her husband on the floor, cold and unresponsive. Toxicology, though, shows that massive dose of fentanyl. Experts say the concentration is consistent with a deliberate poisoning, not casual contact, not a medical prescription gone wrong. To the defense, it's still a mystery. They argue the state cannot prove exactly when the fentanyl was introduced, in what form or by whose hand. After Eric's death, the story takes a surreal turn. Kouri writes and publishes a children's book about grief. Are you with me? A picture book about a child processing the loss of a father. She appears on local TV. She reads in classrooms. She speaks as a grieving widow, a mother helping other children survive the very pain her own boys are living through. Prosecutors say those pages weren't just therapy. They say the book was inspired by, and built on, a death she caused herself. To them, it's chilling, a woman turning the loss of her husband into a brand. All while, they alleged, spending the money linked to his death and fighting over his estate behind the scenes. The defense calls this narrative cruel and unfair. They insist a mother writing about grief after losing her husband is evidence of trauma and not guilt. They argue that the prosecution is weaponizing her attempt to cope, turning a children's book into Exhibit A. Then, from inside the jail, comes something prosecutors seize on, the walk the dog letter. While awaiting trial, Kouri allegedly writes a handwritten note. On the surface, it appears to be instructions for a family member. But prosecutors say it's more than that. They call it the letter that exposes her state of mind. In the note, she allegedly outlines how a witness should testify, suggesting a story that could throw suspicion onto someone else or raise the idea that Eric might have obtained drugs on his own. Prosecutors say this wasn't just communication, it was coaching. An attempt to script a new version of events from behind bars. To them, the walk the dog letter shows consciousness of guilt. That even after Eric's death, even after the charges, Kouri was still trying to control the narrative, like walking a dog on a leash. The defense frames it differently. They say the letter is being misinterpreted, that it reflects confusion, fear, and the chaos of a woman sitting in jail. Not a mastermind directing perjury, but for a jury, a handwritten note can be powerful. It's one of the few times they see the defendant's voice, unfiltered, on paper. At the center of all of this are three boys, children who lost their father in the middle of the night and now see their mother in a courtroom, accused of killing him. On one side, a prosecution building a story of debt, poison, a grief book, and a jailhouse letter. On the other, a defense arguing that the state is stacking coincidences and suspicions into a narrative they cannot scientifically prove. For Kouri Richins, the stakes are her freedom and her future as a mother. For Eric Richins, and for his family, the stakes are something else, whether they will ever feel that justice has been done. So what do you see in this case? A widow crushed under grief and bad decisions, or a black widow who wrote his ending and then sold the story? Join the investigation. Next, watch my breakdown of another alleged black widow case, where the system almost believed the wrong story.